we have been, over the last few years, talking significantly about the impact of a diminishing budget for state resources, particularly schools, hospitals, and in this case, now our courts, because yesterday gunshots rang out inside the Wynberg Magistrates Court. A brazen gunman shot and killed a state witness. According to police, the man entered the court at about 11 a.m. and then targeted a man sitting outside a courtroom. He was shot multiple times and died on the scene. This is, in fact, some audio inside the Wynberg Magistrates Court just after that shooting took place.
Dan ons binne die hof skote wat klap hier ons lewens in gevaar hierso. Kyk hier.
Guys, instructions, we must stay inside.
Must stay inside.
This shooting yesterday, it comes a year after another shooting very close to the Wynberg Magistrates Court precinct. There was a woman. She was suspected in a murder case. She was followed out of court and then shot just outside the Wynberg court complex. Freddie Terblanche is a member of the Cape Town Attorneys Association. Good morning, Freddie. Really appreciate your time this morning. Just following last year's shooting, just how much of a concern is safety in and around the Wynberg Magistrates Court complex after yesterday's shooting?
Good morning, Lester and listeners. Thank you for having me. I just wish it was under less shocking circumstances. First and foremost, sincere condolences to the victim's family. The idea of a shooting occurring inside a court building is obviously a major shock to anyone in the legal fraternity. And the fact that this could happen is absolutely deeply troubling. The court should be a neutral and secure place where the laws applied without fear and intimidation, and let alone murder. So people obviously need to know that when they step into a court, they're entering a protected space where law and order prevails, and this kind of thing should not really be happening.
Freddie, I spent my fair time within a court building, Cape Town Magistrates Court, Blue Downs, Belleville, Wynberg, the High Court, regional courts here in the city centre. I know, and this is several years ago since I've last actively reported in courts, I know it to be a space with metal detectives, with security outside, with police officers in and around the complex. But when I read that message from a person describing to them as a court worker, saying because of budget cuts over the last few years, they've seen fewer and fewer security guards at particularly the entrances of our magistrates' courts. Is that accurate?
Yes, I think it is accurate. And also, if you walk into the court buildings, in some cases the weapon detectors aren't working. Security personnel would often sit and talk and not really scan or frisk people properly. So I think the protocols are in place, and at some magistrates' court, most of them, I think there are sufficient resources at the doors, but one should really be focusing on how that is implemented. So I think the protocols are there, but the focus should really be on whether the equipment's working and whether the security personnel is actually focusing and paying attention.
I know this is a case that happened inside a court complex, but it could have happened outside. This person who was shot was a state witness. What does it say about how the National Prosecuting Authority safeguards state witnesses, especially since News 24 reporting this morning that the victim in this case, was apparently linked to investigations of taxi violence, and that has its own dynamic in terms of organized crime and various rackets. What does it tell you about the NPA's witness protection program, or not even someone who is under deep protection, but simply someone who's agreed, I will testify on behalf of the state?
Yeah, I think the first thing to remember is that witnesses normally don't like to come to court. There are mechanisms in place to compel people to come to court, and if you don't comply, you can be arrested, you can be detained, and you can go to jail for 2 years. So in a lot of instances, testifying in a court of law is not optional. It's something that witnesses must do if they're called upon to do so. And for that reason, I think that the state definitely has a duty to ensure that witnesses are adequately protected. We do have the Witness Protection Act, which governs the protection of witnesses in cases, especially serious, high-profile, high-risk criminal cases. So any person who is involved in a court case of that nature should be in a position to apply for witness protection. I think it should be offered to them as well. And then, there are various ways and means of protecting the witness. I mean, moving them to safe houses, ensuring that they've got 24-hour security protection, especially if the risk to life is foreseeable. I think the problem in this instance is, the police and they should really be protecting people under witness protection inside and outside of court. But the fact that the witness was allowed to sit, I believe, on his own on a bench outside court waiting without any form of protection, it reveals to me that the state was probably thinking that the security at the doors wouldn't allow anyone into the building with a weapon, which should be the case. So, there's some serious investigative work that needs to be done in order to identify how this was possible to happen.
Freddie, it's one thing to ask how a shooter got into the court complex bypassing metal detectors, which we don't know if they worked or not. You've given a picture where in some instances metal detectors don't work, but the shooter fled the scene, no arrests have been made. So it asks the question, how does then an active shooter get out of a court building? What is the lockdown procedure? Of course, you can't speak for the Department of Justice here, but from your experience, what is the procedure when it comes to locking down a court building?
Look, I think that's exactly as you said. It's as simple as that. When there's a shooting in the building, the door should be closed. All access points and exit points should be closed, and the suspect should be apprehended inside the building. So how this happened, I simply can't say. It's something that would have to be investigated. I don't want to speculate about potential involvement of personnel, but it's definitely something that people would want to know. And on top of that, the Wynberg police station is only 50 meters from the court building.
Door, yes.
So it's right next door. So in my experience, and I don't do a lot of work in that court, but every now and then when I do go there, there are police everywhere. So how this was supposed to, I don't know.
Plenty of questions and diverting a little bit, but plenty of questions being asked from listeners in terms of the administration of justice. What is the provision for video link via Zoom? I know that there are instances where offenders can make appearances from certain court buildings, but what about witnesses appearing via some sort of digital link? Freddie?
Yeah, look, I haven't looked into that too deeply. I briefly looked into it yesterday, and I think that there are rules against it, especially in criminal cases. So one of the constitutional rights that any accused person has is to cross-examine his accuser. So it's not something I think that that would be possible in criminal cases. I know in civil cases, it's not a problem. We often testify over Microsoft Teams in cases in different jurisdictions in the high courts. But I think in criminal cases, it's a bit more complicated than that. But one shouldn't forget that this incident is not the norm. It's not supposed to happen. There should be measures in place to protect witnesses.
Freddie Terblanche, really appreciate your time, member of the Cape Town Attorneys Association.